Hi, it's Christina from the Sisyphean Journal, and today's rant from my kitchen is going to be a commentary on Dr. Karlyn Borysenko's rant about Tulsi Gabbard and her little scorched earth campaign. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other two aspects. I'm just going to talk about the one that I know about, which is abortion. So we're going to follow what Dr. Borysenko has to say, and I'm going to add a little bit more information and commentary. So here we go.
Tulsi didn't stop there, and this next one is really going to piss off the Democrats, but I also agree with this one too. This is from Live Action. Democratic Representative Tulsi Gabbard introduces bill to protect abortion survivors.
Okay, now here's something that we need to think about. There already is a federal Born Alive Infants Protection Act, and doctors are still admitting that they don't let these babies live. Um, I think it was the Florida House, they had a Planned Parenthood representative who she was asked, well, what do you do if the baby comes out alive? And it says, well, we would kind of talk to the family, I mean the mother and the woman, and let her make that choice. And I really recommend watching the movie Gosnell. It really very accurately followed, it got all the major points of the Kermit Gosnell investigation and trial. They took some liberties for the sake of making the story flow smoothly, but a lot of the testimony was in the courtroom scenes in the movie were taken directly from transcripts, including when Gosnell's attorney questioned the state's witness about how a proper legal abortion is done. Well, what if one did come out alive? It says, and you provide comfort care. You keep the baby warm, fetus warm, and eventually it will die. And, Gosnell's attorney rightly pointed out that the big difference between what Gosnell was on trial for his life over versus what is a perfectly accepted practice in modern abortion is that he used scissors and they used towel plus time. And basically, the Born Alive Infants Protection Act just said you're supposed to treat them like you would any other baby of that gestational age and degree of health, even if the mother signed on the dotted line for an abortion. And it meant nothing. It had no teeth. And part of the problem they have is when a baby's born alive right now, you can charge with murder, but it depends a lot on the medical examiner and it depends a lot on the prosecutor. They had a case in Florida where a baby was born alive in a clinic run by a woman named Belkis Gonzalez. And the baby was born alive. Gonzalez came over, scooped up the baby and the placenta into a biohazard bag, and left the room. And the mother actually went out to the pro-lifers to report this. And this is something people don't get. Those pro-lifers outside the clinic, they are the woman's best friend. They will move heaven and earth for her. Not just to help her avoid the abortion, they help women after the abortion. They were the ones that supported this woman. She came out, she says, my baby was born alive. They put it in a biohazard bag. So the pro-lifers called the cops. The cops came, they went in the clinic. There's no sign of a baby that was put in a biohazard bag. The cops leave. One of the staff members comes out later and tells the pro-lifers to call the cops. The cops come back, and there's the biohazard bag with a severely decomposed baby in it. Gonzalez had chucked the biohazard bag with a live baby in it up on the clinic roof in the hot Florida sun. And then by the time she got it down, it was too badly decomposed to prove that the baby had been born alive. Now, the problem was the baby was gestationally old enough that merely by putting it in a biohazard bag and throwing it on the roof, even if they hadn't killed it, at that age, they should have taken it to the hospital, and they didn't. So the point of these Born Alive Infant Protection Act is they need to have some teeth. There need to be penalties for people who refuse to enforce it. That's a biggie. We saw with Gosnell that abortion clinics were supposed to be inspected. Why bother? Okay, his staff aren't trained. Women are dying. They're drugging these patients. Flea-infested cats are roaming around and crapping on the floor. They're washing the blankets once a week if they get around to it. But, we don't want to restrict access, so we're not going to look. You know, there needs to be some teeth. The people who fail to enforce these laws need to be held accountable. That's what we need at the federal level. We need to say, look, 14th Amendment, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. If that baby comes out and you don't provide proper care, you have deprived that baby of life without due process. And if your state allows that, we're going to slap you the heck down for that. Okay, enough of a ramble.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has introduced a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives aimed at protecting abortion survivors by ensuring they receive care after birth rather than being left to die.
Another point is they will claim that, well, these abortions are only being done on babies that were moribund anyway. Well, if the baby was dying anyway, the care you would provide to that baby would be you keep it warm and comfortable. If, on the other hand, that baby just has Down syndrome, or the baby's mother just didn't want it, or the baby's mother panicked, or she's mentally ill, or whatever, if there's absolutely nothing physically wrong with that baby, or that baby only has mild physical problems, you're supposed to treat that baby the way you would any other baby. But the abortion lobby wants people to believe, they want so badly for you to believe that any baby that comes out alive during an abortion was this close to death anyway. That's not true. Most post-viability abortions are done for the same reasons earlier abortions are done. The real definitive factor is what the doctor's willing to do. And there is a video online of a woman who, she was like 32 weeks pregnant, and she had her ultrasound so that she could read the numbers off it, called a clinic in, I think it was New Mexico, and talking about, this is a wanted baby, but her husband lost his job, these things happen, and they made an appointment for her to go in and get this 32-week abortion because her husband lost his job. Okay, it's entirely the discretion of the doctor. Legally, some states do have a cutoff, but they don't necessarily enforce it. Like in Kansas, they had a 24-week cutoff unless the mother faced a substantial and permanent impairment of a bodily function, and they included mental health. So Dr. Tiller had Kristen Newhouse as the other doctor. And she basically just rubber stamped them. She talked to the girl, he's this 16-year-old girl. I won't be able to go to college on my cheerleading scholarship. Well, okay, we'll do the abortion. They didn't do a psychiatric workup. They didn't do any kind of meaningful assessment of whether this really was something that was necessary for her mental health, or whether you were actually feeding into despair and feelings of having no control over their life. I'll provide a link below. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. McHugh went over those records. So Tiller was violating Kansas law. None of those abortions were legal because none of those women and girls would suffer irreversible psychiatric harm if you didn't do the abortion. They just, would have to adjust their lives a little bit or make an adoption plan. So it's all a matter of how or whether it's enforced.
Gabbard, who was in the early 2020 presidential candidates, blah, 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 introduced H.R. 8923 on Wednesday. The bill would amend Title 18 of the U.S. Code to ensure a healthcare practitioner exercises the proper degree of care in a case of a child who survives an abortion or an attempted abortion. That bill has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Again, I don't have a whole lot of hope.
The wording and penalties involved in Gabbard's Born Alive protection bill are unavailable at this time.
Again, it's a big deal about the specific wording and the penalties. That there needs to be a clear penalty on everybody involved. And really, I don't understand why it's not murder by neglect. But again, it all depends from state to state. It all depends on who the prosecutor it is. It depends a lot on who the medical examiner is. It so much depends on public officials and whether they think that baby's life was worth saving or not.
But shockingly, Gabbard has at points in her career held a 100% pro-abortion voting record and voted against the Born Again Survivors Act in 2015. However,
That's another thing that people need to understand. I don't want pro-choicers to change their minds about their core values. What I want is for you, if you're a pro-choicer, to get red pilled. You cannot trust the mainstream media, and you cannot trust abortion lobbying organizations. Okay? This abortion okay up until birth, and if the baby survives, wrap it in a towel and stick it in a closet. That is the only acceptable thing. They do not want clinics to be inspected. They don't want decent informed consent for the woman. They pretty much want whatever that abortion clinic owner wants to do. That's the standard of care, and they're just allowed to do that. And I've done a lot of talk about how that's, look at Kermit Gosnell. They had absolutely no problem with that. It was state officials were like, yeah, works for me. So, and the National Abortion Federation went in, inspected his clinic, knew how bad it was, and kept their mouths shut, didn't do anything to try to shut it down. There is no behavior that an abortion doctor can do that's going to be bad enough that they're going to stand up and say this needs to stop.
Gabbard's desire to see restrictions on abortion in the third trimester has earned her criticism from many in the Democratic Party, though she has not backed down from this stance. I think the third trimester, unless a woman's life or health consequences is at risk, then there shouldn't be an abortion in the third trimester, she stated in October 2019. Listen.
Okay, now we're going to get to this whole health of the mother. This is another thing you need to keep in mind. These post-viability abortions, they are not done in hospitals. Okay. If a woman is past the point of fetal viability and she has a serious health problem, oh, come on. This is a no-brainer. They induce labor or they perform a C-section. Especially, my best friend had gestational lupus, where she had a lupus crisis and they had to get that baby out or she was going to die. And they put her in the operating room in a fully equipped hospital. And they did C-sections and they delivered those babies. And those babies are grown up now and have children of their own in two of the three cases. The one girl isn't married yet. A reasonable, responsible doctor will want to keep his patient in a hospital, will want to have a highly qualified medical team there, nurses and technicians and laboratory resources and MRIs and EKGs and just all these resources if this woman's life or health is in danger. These abortions aren't done in those settings. These abortions are done on an outpatient basis. They take 3 or 4 days. The woman spends very little of that time under any medical supervision. She spends most of it in a hotel room. In Tiller's case, he had a deal with the La Quinta where they would give a discount to his patients for those 3 or 4 days where they're in that hotel room. And they give the mother a little packet in case she goes into labor in the motel room. She's got, and I'll provide a link below. She's supposed to just sit on the toilet, call the clinic, they'll send somebody over, and they'll take the dead baby out of the toilet for her and take care of everything. Okay? So this woman supposedly has life or health threatening medical condition. Why would you want her to travel past any number of fully equipped hospitals and instead spend 3 or 4 days in a motel with her mom or her husband or her boyfriend or her sister or whoever she brought with her? What kind of sense does that even begin to make?
I agree with that position. Most of you know, and listen, if you call me a baby killer in the comments, I'm going to block you and you won't be able to comment again. So
yeah, that's another bugaboo that drives me crazy. Pro-lifers, stop assuming that because somebody's pro-choice, they're gleefully wanting to kill babies, okay? Go to Equal Rights Institute, listen to a whole bunch of Josh Brahm's things, Scott Klusendorf. If you don't understand where somebody is, you can't lead them out of that place, can you? And you need to stop assuming that this is some kind of gleeful hatred of babies, okay? And stop with the name calling. A lot of pro-choice people are actually heartbroken at the thought of abortion. They would never dream of it themselves. If a friend came to them thinking of an abortion, they'd actually try to talk them out of it. You can't know what that person's thinking until you get to know them and talk to them, and you are never going to get anywhere just going, oh, you're a baby killer, okay?
Good. So be warned. I am pro-choice. I am pro-choice with limits because I do believe that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare.
Okay, the safe, legal, and rare. I can tell you, this is important for you pro-choice people to know. The abortion politicians and the abortion rights groups, that's safe, legal, and rare, the only part they care about is legal. Legal is non-negotiable, and it's that every abortion that a abortion clinic or abortion practitioner gets it into their head to do must be legal. There must be no negative repercussions ever, 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 ever. Oh, all right. If it's absolutely Kermit Gosnell, you can go after him once you uncovered it. But these are the people who supported Bruce Steer after what he did to Sharon Hamplin. Left her hemorrhaging in the care of staff that literally plunked her into a wheelchair and shoved her out the door to die. And the pro-choice movement rallied around him, not around her bereaved parents or her orphaned 3-year-old child. So you need to get it through your heads that the only part of that that really matters to them is legal. That's non-negotiable. Safe, they're primarily worried about it being safe for the doctor and the clinic, safe from any state interference, safe from inspectors coming in, safe from people taking their license away, safe from lawsuits, safe from prosecution if they do something as appalling as what Gosnell did. Okay? They prefer that it be safe for the woman because you can't sell it. 50% of abortions are repeat abortions. Okay. You want that repeat customers, right? Well, if you mangle her uterus and she winds up with a hysterectomy, she's not going to be back for any more abortions, is she? If she winds up, a vegetable in a nursing home, you're not going to be able to sell her any more abortions, are you? You need to make sure she walks out of there with an intact uterus so she can get pregnant again and be one of those 50% who's there for repeat abortions. You want her in there for abortion number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, it's in their best interest to not mangle her, but they are not going to make safety a priority. They will not. You need to understand that safety is not a priority. And as for rare, that is anathema to them. I listened to years of National Abortion Federation risk management tapes. And during the height of the AIDS thing, when people were panicking, they were having a meeting and they were lamenting that even women who were on the pill were insisting that their partners use condoms because they were so afraid of getting HIV. And there they are in this meeting, lamenting that this was driving the unplanned pregnancy rate down. They were losing customers, and they were discussing ways to get the unintended pregnancy rate back up so that they weren't losing business. How do they do that without sounding like they don't care whether or not women get AIDS? Okay? Put that in your noggin. The rare, hell no.
I just do. I'm sorry. I also have concerns as a woman who has been assaulted. I don't believe that women should have to carry the baby of the person who assaults them. And guys know I don't really mean assault, but I'm not allowed to say the word.
Okay, and this is another area where I think the abortion lobby used our natural sympathy for assault victims as a wedge. The rate at which victims of assault choose abortion is actually lower than the rate among the general population. A lot of women wind up aborting not because they want to get rid of the baby, but because people won't believe them when they say they were assaulted unless they head for the abortion clinic, because it's, oh, you can't possibly want to have the rapist baby, as if the woman is just the ground in which a man plants her seed. A baby is more the woman's child than it is the man's child. It's got her mitochondrial DNA. Okay, she's given it, even the DNA, she's given slightly more than 50%. So women actually feel a lot of pressure to abort, even if they don't want to, when they become pregnant as a result of these assaults, because they're finding people won't believe them. And there's other topics that we can get into later, but that's just an important thing to keep in mind. Some of these women are not choosing abortion after an assault because that's what they want. They're choosing it because of their support network rolling their eyes at them and, yeah, it was rape. I can tell, because you want to have that guy's baby.
That I really mean, because YouTube will instantly demonetize the video. They might demonetize it anyway, talking about this. Who the heck knows? So I'm not, people like to call me pro-abortion. I'm not pro-abortion. I've never had an abortion. I don't think I ever would have an abortion. I think abortion is sad. I think abortion should be one of the toughest decisions that women ever have to make.
Okay, another thing is this assumption that the woman is really freely making the decision. That is very much a misconception. I've talked about the fact that anything the abortion clinic wants to do, the abortion lobby is 100% behind them. There are tapes of Planned Parenthood counselors lying to undercover investigators posing as patients, where they lie to them about the baby. This blob of tissue, this size of a grain of rice. They'll say anything that they need to say to make that sale. To expect an abortion clinic to be providing proper informed consent, that is as realistic as expecting a used car salesman to really be thinking, now what is this person's true transportation need? Do they need a new car at this point in their life? Can they afford it? No, that's not what the used car salesman's there for. He's there to sell them the most expensive car he can sell them, right? And an abortion clinic, they are there to sell the abortion.
I don't think it's something to be celebrated. These women that go around cheering their abortions and saying, oh, I've had 6 abortions, are they using it as birth control? That to me is disgusting. And I don't think that that should be the reality that we live in. And for me, this was actually shocking because, I mean, again, like you guys know, I haven't really, like, there were times when I wasn't really paying attention. I feel like I went to sleep in 2018 when everyone was on board with like a 3-month limit on.
Okay, this perception that everybody was on board with a 3-month limit on abortion, that's something where most pro-choice people actually think that all this time there has been a 3-month limit on abortion. There hasn't been. Roe versus Wade basically decided that there could be no restrictions up to 3 months. 0 restrictions. The state wasn't allowed to do anything that might stand between a woman and an abortion. Then during the second trimester, they were allowed to have mechanisms in place to protect the woman's health. And then if the state chose, they could limit third trimester abortions to those for health or life of the mother. And you have to realize these third trimester abortions are not a medical concept. Medically, abortion is ending the pregnancy prior to fetal viability. Post-viability abortions were something that was invented by the Supreme Court in 1973 with the Roe versus Wade decision, where they said that states are only allowed to ban them if they have a health exception. And Roe versus Wade didn't define what a health exception was. The companion decision, Doe versus Bolton, did, and it defined health so broadly that literally anything would be good enough. I feel like I'm fat, and that's bad for my self-esteem. That's health. That's part of her well-being. Oh, I'd be nervous about whether I'd be going into labor during Little League playoffs, and I wouldn't want to risk missing Little League playoffs. Well, okay, that's a family thing. That meets it. I mean, literally, if she could come up with a reason, you could drive it through that Doe versus Bolton health exception. Now, later, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the state of Pennsylvania tightened that up to I think it may have been Pennsylvania that came up with it has to be a risk of severe and permanent harm. But as I've discussed before, the whole idea of a health abortion in the third trimester is ridiculous on its face, because nobody would send her to the La Quinta to spend 4 days if she has a serious health problem, would they? No, they would do an emergency C-section or induced labor in a hospital.
abortion and I woke up and all of a sudden people are like abortion up until the point after birth. Like,
Okay, now the whole afterbirth thing. Now the abortion lobby kind of rolled over and played dead with Doe versus with Planned Parenthood v. Casey, where, oh, all right, you're allowed to tighten up the limits after 24 weeks. And part of that was at the same time they had this case in New York. Um, Abu Hayat made the news, and he was a National Abortion Federation member. He started an abortion on a woman who thought she was in the second trimester. He pulled the arm off and went, oops, this baby's a lot further along than I thought. Sent the woman home, hoping the baby would bleed to death in the night and be easy to take apart the next day. She went into labor, went into the hospital, gave birth to a baby missing her right arm at the shoulder. And the woman went public. It was even on Phil Donahue. So National Right to Life kind of painted this as Anna Rosa versus the National Abortion Federation. Anna Rosa was the name of this baby, Anna Rosa Rodriguez. So they didn't want to come off as, we are on the side of this guy who ripped the arm off this 32-week baby and, had her born maimed. So I think that's a lot of the reason that they rolled over and played dead at that point. And what they really did is go to the states and just kind of, you don't really need to enforce this. Wink, wink. Yeah, I know that it says irreversible harm, but wink, wink. Okay. What happened, however, is the Kermit Gosnell thing. For all the Kermit Gosnell being characterized as an outlier, that is a lie. That man got referrals from reputable abortion clinics who their doctors just weren't comfortable doing late abortions. And you need to keep your doctor. So if your doctor is like, look, I'll do suction abortions, but as soon as I have to reach in and start pulling out limbs, I'm not going there, then they would just send the women to Gosnell. There was an abortion clinic, National Abortion Federation member in Delaware, where Gosnell worked one day a week, and he started illegal third trimester abortions there, and he finished them in his Philadelphia clinic by having his untrained staff dope these women within inches of their lives, induce labor, and then when the babies were born, he'd sever their spines with surgical scissors. Okay? The National Abortion Federation clinic was in the loop when they were doing this. Because Detective Jim Wood said, no, this isn't okay, he put pressure on the authorities in Philadelphia to go after him. So when the FBI and the DEA had a drug raid, they allowed Detective Wood and other Philadelphia cops to go in to get information about the death of Karnamaya Mangar, who was one of the patients who died. That's when they found the fetuses all over the place. If you really need to watch the movie Gosnell, you really, 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 really need to watch it. Seriously, if you want to have a clue what's going on in abortion clinics in America. Gosnell was the worst that I've seen, but it was a matter of degree, not kind. Okay? So Gosnell was in that world. And I know Dr. Robert Christ, high-profile national abortion member, he was the one that, most of you aren't going to remember this even if you are pro-lifers, but back in the late 1990s, a tissue procurer named Dean Alberti went to Life Dynamics and said, look, they're having me cut open live babies to harvest their organs. And if I start to cut them open and they start to wriggle, I call the doctor over and he'll drown them in saline or snap their necks or, kill them and go, okay, now you can take the organs. Okay. So I know Christ was doing it. Douglas Carpin in Texas. Now he's since closed his clinic. Weeping and lamentation. Abortion Barbie was really upset about that. This guy was a piece of work. I've done videos about him. But 3 of his employees went to Life Dynamics and testified about babies born alive, viable third trimester babies born alive that he'd killed, and they had taken pictures, and those look like, I've seen enough pictures of aborted babies. Okay, pro-lifers go dumpster diving at abortion clinics and fish out aborted babies all the time. Women go and they expel these babies at home, and they go crying to the pro-lifers about it. Okay, these look like babies that were born alive and then killed the way these women describe. So I get the sneaking suspicion that the reason all of a sudden they're abortion up to birth and you don't have any responsibility the baby even after it's born is because Kermit Gosnell went on trial for his life. He was convicted, and the only way he avoided the death penalty was because he agreed that he would not.
I don't know what the hell
Oops, hold
happened.
on. Oops. Gosnell agreed that he wouldn't appeal his conviction if they just gave him life in prison.
But I will say that it was shocking to me to read that if a baby survives an abortion, the hospitals didn't give them care.
Okay, it's not the hospitals didn't give them care, because the babies typically are not born in hospitals. They're born in freestanding clinics, and the clinics, they're being paid to kill the baby. Now, yes, way back in the 1970s and into the mid to late 1980s, there were some abortions that were still being done in hospitals, particularly the saline induction abortions were being done in hospitals. And that's a situation, it's really bizarre. I'm going to tell you one story from back when they had these saline wards. A 15-year-old girl was, I think, about 32 weeks pregnant, but she found out that Dr. William Baxter Waddle would do an abortion. She went into the hospital, she had the abortion, the baby was born alive. So here, this baby was born alive in a hospital. This tells you what it does to your mind when you work around abortion. The nurse sees the baby moving, she goes to another nurse, like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. What are we supposed to do? They go to the nursing supervisor, and I think the nursing supervisor didn't primarily work in the abortion ward. I think she worked in the whole obstetrics department. She took the baby to the nursery and called Waddle. And Waddle gets to the hospital, and these nurses are trying to intubate the baby and take care of the baby. He chases them out and strangles the baby in a hospital nursery. Now, he was required by law to call in another doctor for a consult, and he did. But for some reason, that phone call was recorded, and Gosnell is like, not Gosnell, Waddle is like, don't get squirrely on me. Just say that when you got here, the baby was already dead. And the poor doctor gets to the hospital, and Waddle's there. I can't find the goddamn trachea. This baby won't stop breathing. I was like, why don't you just let the baby live? This baby came out from a saline abortion. It can't live, or it'll be a big mess. An emergency room physician poked his head in. So this guy strangled a 32-week baby in front of 2 doctors and a couple of nurses in a hospital nursery, and he got away with it. He got a hung jury because there was some obscure definition of the word death, and one juror says, well, you can't prove that under that definition of death, Waddle caused baby W's death. But for the most part, these babies are not born in hospitals. They're born in freestanding clinics, which is the biggest reason they're able to get away with it. This is a freestanding abortion clinic. They exist for abortion.
Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, that is incredibly.
Oh, but also, I actually think it was an originally religious hospital. Jill Stanek became a pro-lifer because she worked at a hospital that had started doing live birth abortions. They would just induce labor, wrap the baby in the towel, and stick it in the utility room and leave it to die. So now that I'm thinking about it, even though these abortions aren't typically done in hospitals, sometimes they are. And yes, they just let the baby die. They wrap it in a towel and stick it in the utility closet. That is the accepted standard of care.
Inhumane, dude. Like, you want to push people like me to be more like, if I'm on a scale of pro-choice to pro-life, crap like this pushes me way towards the pro-life end, because people like this that are not giving care to babies who survive abortions, like, that to me is just incredibly inhumane and disgusting. And so I am completely in support of this bill. All right, so those are
Okay, so Dr. Karlyn, well, hats off to you for doing this. Hats off to to Tulsi Gabbard. And maybe we can talk about this sometime, because I really want to have discussions with pro-choicers. And like I said, I do not want you to change where you stand on abortion, mainly because once you become a pro-lifer, you're freaking useless. Nobody's going to believe a word you say because you're just one of those horrible anti-choicers. Pro-choice people banding together, if pro-choice people banded together, probably the abortion rate would fall 90% because you people would never tolerate the stuff that the abortion lobby and these politicians are like, yeah, well, works for me.